Stories for all seasons.
Stones of Harvestia, Genesis of Thanksgiving. Part 1. It was the second year of famine in the lands. Farmers have long since given up on their crops, as farm tools rust away in empty barns. In Autumnville, the blight has finally gotten the best of the last green crops. The last of the crops have been ravished with black spots, turning the vegetables into a rotting, detestable version of what it once was. Luckily, blight-affected vegetables were too disgusting for even pests to enjoy. Having to deal with a mountain of insects on top of starvation would be like pouring salt on a wound. Just like the other towns, the most prepared were the wealthy, and the wealthy were the most prepared. Everyone else lived off of the hope that this mysterious plant disease would graciously skip over Autumnville. Daphne and Shawana eagerly waited at the back of the line to get their daily bowl of soup from the giant pot. Ever since the other caregivers fled Autumnville, Daphne and Shawana assumed most of the duties they left behind. Ms. Corrin dipped the ladle in the vegetable soup, hoping that she could at least gather 2 bits of carrots or broccoli from the liquid. As she pulled up the ladle, the fake smile she was able to sustain all lunch fell a few inches. There wasn't anything in the ladle. She tried again, this time stirring the pot to see if the contents of the scoop would be different. Unfortunately, it was only liquid. "It's okay, Ms. Corrin. The broth is delicious anyway," Daphne said as she extended her bowl. "Yes, I agree. I'm sure it'll be as good as yesterday," Shawana said, standing behind Daphne with a smile on her face. A gloss of tears welded up in Ms. Corrin's eyes, as her shaky, wrinkled hands poured the warm broth into the bowls of the smiling teens. Ever since the famine, donations to the orphanage dwindled to a mere few sacks of potato, or an assortment of nearly spoiled vegetables to feed the 50 children. "I heard the Red Bandits are coming to Autumnville tomorrow. And I heard if you don't have any food to give them, they'll eat your children," Stephen said. He smiled menacingly as the eyes of the small kids widened with fear. "Stephen, stop being an idiot. I'm sure you taste like muddy shoes, so I bet you're safe," Shawana said. "Yes, you should know better. We have a hard time trying to get them to sleep at night. I don't need them waking us up about some foolish story you made up," Daphne said. "Oh, so you think I'm making up stories? Well, how do you explain this?" Stephen said. He pulled out a piece of paper with a monster face drawn on it. He pressed it against his face and growled. The children screamed, some of them knocking over their soup in the process. Daphne reached over and flicked Stephen's nose. "Ouch! It was just a joke, you hairy troll," Stephen said. "It wouldn't be funny if I make you eat this soup from the floor," Shawana said, as she scraped the spilled soup in a bowl. Ms. Corrin never intervenes in the small squabbles anymore. It was as though she'd embraced the small specks of chaos. It was one of the last instances of normalcy left. As Shawana and Daphne flicked Stephen's ear for the last few times, Ms. Corrin shuffled over to the table, rested her hands on the teenagers, and said, "It's almost 12 o'clock. "Yes, ma'am," they replied in unison. 12 o'clock was the time the girls would go to the town center to lobby for donations on behalf of the orphanage. After rolling the large wooden cart among the people, they set up shop beside Mr. Roven's stall. He tightened his jaw as the cart rolled beside him. He like most of the vendors, felt that the orphans' cause dwarfed their potential sales. Who could blame him? The air has been tense ever since the blight ravaged the last of the crops. A sense of doom hung over Autumnville like a dark cloud with no wind to move it. The girls began to shake the heavy bells and recite their appeal to the town's citizens. "Help the hungry orphans! Have mercy on the children!" they yelled. A horse-drawn cart pulled in front of them. The driver of the cart wore a hooded cloak and turned his face away from the girls. "Take it, it's yours," the driver said. He removed the large cloth that covered the cart, exposing an ungodly amount of flour, meat, vegetables, and fruit. The girls were speechless at first, too surprised to even flinch. "Hurry up, I don't have all day," the driver said. The girls looked at each other, then began to unload the bags of food. "Thank you, sir. You're more than kind," Shawana said. "Blessings on you and your family," Daphne added. The driver didn't so much as turn around or acknowledge their gratitude. "What is your name, sir?" Daphne said. She walked to the front of the cart to look their generous donor in the eye. The driver turned his face away and said, "You got everything?" "Yes," Daphne said. "Well, get off my cart. I have to go," the driver said. Daphne was barely out of the way before he whipped the horse's reins and sped off out of the town square. Soon, people gathered around the girls and the now packed handcart. "Cabbage? Carrots? Watermelon? Some of these aren't even in season," one bystander said. "And look, there is no mark of the blight on them either," another bystander said. The crowd became far too thick, and eyes far too hungry for the girls to stand idly. "That's an awful lot of food for just a few children. About half of that will do that orphanage good," a man said, showing his dingy teeth and rubbing a head of cabbage. Out of nowhere, a stick stopped short of the man's throat. "Why don't you back away and take a bath?" Mr. Roven said, holding the thick piece of wood against the man's neck. The man stepped back and smiled menacingly. "Go on, get out of here so I can finally sell something," Mr. Roven said to the girls. The girls nodded and with haste headed back toward the orphanage. As the girls entered the orphanage grounds, the kids abandoned their games and rallied around the girls with the full cart. Miss Corrin stepped outside after hearing the commotion outside the kitchen door. She froze as the girls rolled the bounty of food towards her. Who gave this to you?" Miss Corrin said through quivering lips. "I don't know. Well, we didn't see a face, nor did we get a name," Shawana said. Miss Corrin furrowed her eyebrows. "Well, it seemed as though he didn't want us to know who he was," Daphne said. "I guess this stranger may not be one for fame. Nonetheless, I pray blessings on them and their family," Miss Corrin said. Dinner was robust once again. Miss Corrin's face glowed with a genuine smile as she loaded each plate with food. Loud bangs suddenly reverberated through the dining hall of the orphanage. Everyone jumped simultaneously as the wide wooden doors flung open. 15 armed guardsmen flooded the dining room and surrounded Shawana and Daphne, grabbing their arms and pulling them away from their meal. "What's the meaning of this? Unhand those girls!" Miss Corrin said. One of the guardsmen put his hand forward and blocked Miss Corrin from getting too close. "Do not interfere. These girls are wanted for theft," the guard said. "This is ridiculous. These girls would never do such a thing," Miss Corrin said. "I've seen them with my own eyes," I even tried to stop them, the man said. It was the man from the market who tried to take some of the food. He's lying. We didn't steal anything, Daphne said. Well, how do you suppose you got all those fresh vegetables with all the blight going around, huh? The man said. It was given to us, and you know it. You filthy rat, Shawana said. She lunged at the man, landing a solid punch on his long nose. The man fell to the ground holding his nose. The guards held Shawana down. Miss Corrin began to cry and said through her sobbing, "This can't be right. These girls would never do such things. I've known them since they were infants. I raised them myself. They do not have an inch of thievery in them." The guard placed his hands on Miss Corrin's shoulder and said, "It's out of my hands." The girls were taken away while the man from the market grinned, showing off his brown and crooked teeth. "Mr. Thomas, in the name of the Baron and Mayor of Autumnville, we extend our gratitude for your service," the guardsman said. Soon, the guardsman retrieved all of the food from the kitchen and loaded it on a cart outside of the orphanage for Mr. Thomas as a reward. With shackles, the girls shuffled along the dark and dirty corridor of cells at the jail. The guardsman unbound them and shoved them in a tiny cell. "Shawana, Daphne, what are you doing here?" the man in the cell next to them said. When they looked over at the occupant in the cell next to them, they charged the bars. They extended their hands through the metal bars and embraced each other. "Romero," the girls said. "How did you end up here?" Shawana said. Romero paused, looked at the ground, then said, "The Baron, well, I got caught taking something that I didn't get permission to take." "But aren't you the Baron's son now? The heir to the hills of Autumnville?" Daphne said. "That's right. Who'd have enough power to put you in jail?" Shawana said. "The Baron himself," Romero said. The girls looked perplexed. "Enough about me. Why are you two in here?" "Well, it seems as though your adopted father thinks we stole food from him," Shawana said. "And food that was given to us in front of everyone at the town square at that," Daphne added. Romero put his hands over his face and hung his head. "What's the matter?" Daphne said. "That was me who gave you that food. I didn't mean for you to get punished. I just couldn't stand by and watch the orphanage starve, while we have so much crops in the hills," Romero said. The girls looked at one another. "What do you mean, crops?" "The blight took the last crops in Autumnville last month," Shawana said. "Not in the hills. We are harvesting things in and out of season. It's not normal with how quickly the vineyards and farms are replenishing. We are forbidden to talk about it," Romero said. "This doesn't make sense. How is the harvest in the hills so different from everyone else's?" Daphne asked. "Grapes, pumpkins, carrots, potatoes, and everything that can grow replenishes the day after picking them." Shawana and Daphne's faces froze with shock. "What do you mean the next day?" Daphne asked. "Yes, the literal next day. That's why I did what I did. It's just not fair." "So are they doing some kind of wizardry in the hills? Or are you just as crazy as you're trying to make me?" Shawana asked. "I wish it was just me making things up. But everything was different ever since the Baron planted this strange tree. He made me dig the hole and planted this strange seed. He told me to go inside while he and the mayor did something. The next day, a 9-foot-tall white tree with black leaves was in the place where I dug the hole. Since then, I wasn't allowed to go back into town or speak of the crops we were harvesting daily," Romero said. Soon, The guards put out the torches, and thick darkness fell on the cells. The stress of the day eventually exhausted the teens to sleep on the dirty cell floors. At the crack of dawn, the quiet jail was disrupted by two voices. "So, have you decided what to do with the boy?" one voice said. "Well, I think there is only one appropriate action to take," another voice said. "And what say your wife in this matter?" the first voice said. "She could care less about him. He isn't one of hers. Besides, he was only adopted so my imbecile late father could pass the land to me instead of my imbecile brother. Imagine not turning the land over to me, the eldest son, because I didn't have a son of my own to pass the land on to. Stupid traditions. Anyway, the boy outlived his usefulness. I can't afford to have him reveal our... A string of thuds sounded behind the heavy wooden door. The conversations and any human sound ceased thereafter. The door opened, revealing a peculiar-looking fellow holding a lamp. His skin was as green as grass, and his eyes a high orange tone. He was dressed in a glittery cloak that covered his head and feet. The green stranger waved his hands, and the cell doors housing the teens swung open. Then, the teenagers jumped up and held their feet while trying to stay balanced on one leg. "I'm terribly sorry, but we must move at once. We have precisely 1 minute before your captors awake," the green stranger said, looking at a silver pocket watch. The teenagers pressed themselves against the walls of their cells. "Get back! Get back!" Daphne said. The green stranger exhaled and shook his head. "Yes, of course. The green thing. Forgive my startling appearance. My name is Crisitudo. If it is too much of a mouthful, Tudo would be appropriate as well. I am the Grand Vine Knot in Harvestia," Tudo said. His warm greeting didn't usher much of a response from the frightened teens. Tudo took another frustrated breath, then said, "We now have 30 seconds before your captors awake. From what they've discussed, you are going to be disposed of, young man. And you young ladies, I'm certain your fate isn't far from his," Tudo said. The teens reluctantly obeyed and slowly exited their dark cells. Tudo smiled. "Come along," he said, walking towards a stone wall. "The door is that way," Romero whispered. "I'm aware. Please, just follow me." Tudo's arm effortlessly went through the wall in a ghost-like fashion. As Tudo was almost completely through, the teens hesitated to go near the solid wall. Tudo stuck his head back through and screamed, "Look! Behind you!" Growling dog-like creatures lunged at them, causing them to sprint towards the wall, screaming. Tudo held his pocket watch and said, "No minutes left." The teens stood up wide-eyed as they found themselves in the woods and not on or close to the jail grounds. "Do forgive me for the dog creatures back there. We simply didn't have the time for me to convince you to walk through." "What are you?" Shawana said. She distanced herself from Tudo. "I am a vine knot, and I particularly am the Grand Vine Knot," Tudo said. With a smile, he lifted his chin as though their reaction should have been one of awe. Instead, they squinted their eyes and wrinkled their eyebrows. Tudo sighed. "That's right. I keep forgetting you are not your ancestors. Back then, we were worshipped as gods. Against our will, of course. We were often labeled as gods of the harvests. We were created to control plant growth on Earth." Daphne's face lit up. "So does that mean you can help with the famine?" Daphne said. "Well, Under normal circumstances, yes. However, we are in the middle of a war at the moment, Tudo said. We? War? Romero said. I tell you what, let us begin our journey. I will explain everything once we're there, Tudo said. Where are we going? Romero asked. To Harvestia.
Stories for all seasons.